Starfield is still a way off. We don't have an exact release date just yet. We know it's the first half of 2023. Meanwhile, though, there's a brand new interview with Todd Howard and podcaster Lex Fridman. Now, they don't go into tremendous details about Starfield in this. It's more of a casual chat, and the podcast is highly worth watching. I do recommend it, and I'll link the full thing in the video description below. They talk about Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6, and pretty much everything else related to Todd Howard's games, Bethesda's games, and a load of other things as well. Very, very interesting stuff. Now, I did think it worth putting a quick video together here because there's a few points about Starfield that were brought up in the podcast that I'd like to bring up here, discuss here. Largely because I think there are a few points that haven't really been made just yet publicly. So apologies if this is old information and you already know about it, but hopefully some of this is new to you. I'm going to start with planets themselves. It's been confirmed that planets will rotate. It doesn't sound like there's going to be full orbital mechanics in here or anything like that, so I don't think there's going to be full planets moving around stars and moons moving around planets or anything like that. But the planets themselves will rotate around, and this is what will cause the sunset and sunrise. Todd went on to say it's a detail that not everyone will notice and perhaps not everyone would appreciate, but they wanted to include it nonetheless. In terms of the star systems, we know there's plenty of planets actually. One thing they did say is that once you've developed a suitable technology for creating these sorts of planets and enough variations of planets, it doesn't really matter whether you make 1,000, 10,000 or 1,000,000 planets. It's not that much different. It's just a case of changing the parameters, changing the field or a simple number, and you can make as many planets as you like. Bethesda, though, didn't want to go stupidly high with numbers of planets because there are other factors to consider, and these would be primarily for gameplay purposes. For example, really what do you do with 1,000,000 planets that you can't do with 1,000 planets? Now, regarding star systems themselves, another interesting note here, and this is something I hadn't heard before, and again, apologies if you have heard it, but star systems are going to be leveled. This means, like as with a traditional RPG map where certain areas are leveled 1 to 10 and other areas are leveled 10 to 20 and so on and so forth, star systems will work in much the same way, so some will have higher level requirements than others. Additionally, quite understandably, missions and quests will tie into some of these planets and some of these different star systems. It's worth keeping in mind that many locations within the game are handcrafted. These will be the prime locations, the most important locations. They are truly, they look good from what we've seen so far, at least in some of the trailers, some of the footage. There's also going to be a bunch of procedural areas and procedural regions. So some missions, some quests will be sending you to the handcrafted regions and handcrafted zones, whilst others will send you to procedural areas. Bethesda felt it very important to make the distinction here so that players know exactly what they're getting before they head out, and I'm sure there will be a quality difference between the two. So missions will be marked accordingly. They will let you know whether you're heading to primary locations, that's the handcrafted content, or whether they're more of the handcrafted type areas. Space itself, we've said before, this is not going to be as dangerous as some people may be hoping for. Certainly not as dangerous as can be found in some other space games. It has been said before that starships will not require fuel, or they will require fuel. You'll need enough fuel to make a jump. If you haven't got enough fuel, you won't be able to jump. But it's not going to be a case that halfway through your travels, you'll be able to run out of fuel. Now, Bethesda did initially design Starfield in that way. They were going to allow fuel and the ability to run out. They found on testing that when players ran out of fuel, they then have to set a beacon and summon help. Maybe quality help would come, maybe a pirate would come and cause you further trouble. Alternatively, maybe you'd have to land on a nearby planet and gather some resources for fuel before resuming your journey. Now, whilst this is good in survival games and big open world live service titles, it's not ideal for the type of game that Bethesda want to create here. And that's because they felt really that type of interrupt, that type of running out of fuel, really does disrupt the gameplay flow, and that's something I can really understand and get on board with. If I'm playing a single player game, I don't really want to find myself running out of fuel and then having to go grind for resources as you would in a live service game. So I think that's a smart move. And don't forget that, of course, Starfield will be moddable. So if at some point in the future people feel that Starship Fuel would be a better option, I'm sure there will be a mod for it. Finally, one other point they did touch on was the subject of robots. This was in a broader subject in the context of real-world robots. But basically, Todd Howard said that robots aren't a huge part of the game. Whilst there are some robots who are companions and do have a very unique personality, other robots, meanwhile, will be somewhat utilitarian. They will serve a specific purpose, just like a tool or something like that. Now, Todd was very much aware that this is probably not the way things are going to go in the future. He did say if you charted technology forward from our current point in time, then robots are very likely going to play a very big part in future society. They decided not to go that way with Starfield, largely because it's not the tone that they wanted for their fictional universe. So again, another point that I think is very reasonable. All fictional worlds have their different tones, from Star Wars to The Expanse. None of them are the same, so Starfield is certainly going for its unique own vibe, and it seems that Bethesda very much have their own idea of where they want to take things. So that's pretty much all the information that I managed to get from the Lex Fridman podcast with Todd Howard. Again, if you want to see the full thing, do check it out. It's linked in the video description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.